There's a reason that obesity rates in Japan are 10 times less than America. It's because they have tricks that we've never heard of. For example, the Japanese dinner rule that helps people burn 15% more fat, or what I call the 80% rule, which helps people burn 1 pound of fat extra per week. Now there's 3 tips that I want to cover in today's video, but let's start with the most simple. Now this isn't only a tradition in Japan, but people all around the world do this. And this is all you have to do. After every meal, take a 10 to 15 minute walk. It's so simple. That's literally it. But let me explain why it works so well. A simple 10 to 15 minute walk after your meal will prevent blood sugar spikes to a very, very large extent. Now, why is this good, you may ask? Lowering insulin levels helps fat loss because insulin can lead to fat storage and it can also inhibit fat burning. So basically, the lower that we have our insulin levels throughout the day, the better it is for fat loss, and that's what we want to do. Now, the times where our insulin is the highest is when we eat. So if we can introduce this small walking technique, you've instantly reduced your insulin and your body will be in a fat burning stage for a longer period of time during the day. Okay, so that's the first really simple trick. But what about our actual meals? It's all good to know what to do after, but what do we actually eat in our meals? And I'm going to split this next Japanese trick into 2 stages. Okay, so here's the first stage. Japanese diets consist of a lot of fermented foods. I'll put a list on the screen of all different types of fermented foods that exist. Not only that, but these are foods that Japanese people tend to incorporate in their diets. Now, these fermented foods, while they may not sound that appetizing, are actually really underrated and people completely sleep on them, and I'll explain why. Your gut bacteria influences how many calories you extract from food. So lean people have a completely different gut bacteria to people that are obese. Now, what fermented foods do is they introduce beneficial gut bacteria that may favor a lean microbiome. So what that means is you'll have a more diverse gut bacteria, which should lead to lower body fat. Low-grade inflammation is linked to obesity and insulin resistance. Now, these fermented foods have something called probiotics, and these can reduce that gut inflammation. And what does that mean? Well, less inflammation means a better metabolic function, and at the end of the day, a better fat burning. And finally, something that I previously mentioned, but blood sugar control. Some fermented foods can actually reduce post-meal insulin spikes, and what that means is, again, we're not going to be in that process of having super high insulin levels throughout the entire day. And again, less insulin means less fat storage. But then we move on to the second component of the food. The Japanese have something called, and I'm going to have to read this one because I don't know how to say it, hara hachibu. I definitely messed that up. Essentially, it's a Japanese trick where you're taught to eat until you're 8/10 full. So let's say that you're having a meal that's 1,000 calories in its entirety. Let's say you were to normally finish that meal completely and you'd have the entire 1,000 calories and you'd be 10 out of 10 full. What we're going to do is we're going to get to about 8 out of 10 full. And normally you'd be able to tell where this kicks in. It's basically that point where you could eat more and normally you just keep pushing and finish the meal. But in reality, it's getting pretty hard to finish the food. At this point, instead of pushing through, stop. And obviously, in terms of motivational advice, don't take that as motivational advice. Let's keep this to food. If we do this, we're essentially reducing our calorie intake from whatever it is, let's say 1,000, to around 200 less per meal. And if we have, let's say, 3 meals a day, that's 600 less calories. Now, essentially, this is just a way of cutting back calories in a fancy way. But it's an easier way than having to track your calories. Now, this doesn't mean go and fill your plate with 2,000 calories and eat 50% less so you're back at 1,000 and you're still in a surplus. No, this means that if you're someone who's in a slight surplus or at maintenance but you're struggling to cut back on calories, it's just a general rule of thumb that people use to be able to cut back on calories without actively looking at each meal and thinking, okay, I need to reduce the amount I'm eating. Your intention is still the same. You go in, you want to finish this meal, and you do. But you just stop when you're about 80% full. And this is just, again, as I said, a rule of thumb to go about your meals and cut back maybe 100 to 200 calories per meal. But there's one final Japanese trick that you can burn up to 15% more fat per week if you follow. And no, that's not a gimmick. This is true. It's called the Japanese dinner rule. Well, it's not called that, but that's what I call it. It states, eat your largest meal at lunch and your smallest meal at dinner and stop eating by 6 p.m. So let me explain how this works. Now, our first meal is, of course, breakfast. Now, we're going to have the biggest meals, okay? So this is going to be the biggest meal, okay? This is going to be our number 1 biggest meal. Now, when it comes to number 2, it's going to be lunch. So number 2 is going to be our lunch, second biggest meal. And then obviously dinner will be third. So let me break this down. Let's say for breakfast, we're having 1,200 calories. Big meal to start the day off. For lunch, maybe we have 800 calories. And then for dinner, we have 600 calories. Let me explain how this works and why this is a really important rule that the Japanese do and why it should work for you if you follow it. So this is your metabolism. We're gonna draw your metabolism out like this. Okay? Now your metabolism is most active. It's doing all this activity when? Well, it's during the day when you're moving. So maybe this is 10 a.m. until let's say 3 p.m. Okay? This is when you're most active and this is when your metabolism is working the hardest. So eating big meals early while your metabolism is at this active stage will mean that more calories are burnt during daily activity. And then at night, when your metabolism is less active, that's when we can then go ahead and cut down on the calories, and that will mean fewer calories will be stored as fat later on. Second, here is your insulin sensitivity. Now, your body's insulin sensitivity is the highest. Again, it's going to be the highest in the morning and the afternoon. What this means is you'll process carbs and calories more efficiently earlier in the day. And so if we're eating loads or eating the majority of our calories later on in the day, nearer to the evening, it disrupts natural fat burning because our insulin sensitivity is lower. So that means that if we eat in the evening, it disrupts our natural fat burning. And again, if we are trying to do intermittent fasting, it cuts into that also. And that kind of moves me on to my third point, which is that yes, if you are eating loads later on in the day, your fasting window is reduced. And what that means is the amount of time that your body has low amounts of insulin is reduced. And what does that mean? Well, the period of time that our body can actually burn fat, again, is reduced. So that third trick, slowly, progressively eating less and less during the day and finishing food by 6 p.m. is something that the Japanese do. But honestly, anyone should incorporate it because you will benefit heavily from it. So try these 3 things and you'll see the difference.